has finally returned home to serve the remainder of his jail sentence at his huge mansion in Bangkok. Mr. Thaksin was himself exiled for 15 years after being deposed in a coup. Now he is at home surrounded by his family. Outside, many Thais criticize the period's treatment given to the rich and powerful because Mr. Thaksin has not spent a single night in jail. He said he was suffering from serious illness and needed to be treated in the police hospital.
A group of asylum seekers on an isolated British island in the Indian Ocean have told UN investigators they feel unsafe and abandoned. Alice Cuddy reports.
The 61 people on Diego Garcia are mostly Tamils from Sri Lanka. They arrived in October 2021 after their boat ran into trouble while trying to sail to Canada. They then claimed asylum, the first time this has happened on British Indian Ocean territory. United Nations inspectors who visited the group have described their living conditions as lacking privacy, safety and dignity. They say it is arbitrary detention. Asylum seekers, including young children, have made allegations of sexual assault and harassment, committed by others in the camp.
The British government says Diego Garcia is not suitable for the group and is looking for a better long-term solution. This is David Harper in London with the latest world news from the BBC. Qatar has described the latest talks to agree a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas as not very promising. Senior officials from a number of countries have been holding negotiations in Cairo. Qatar's Prime Minister said he remained optimistic that an agreement could be reached, but acknowledged that time was running out. His Israeli counterpart, Benjamin Netanyahu, has insisted that the war in Gaza will continue. He said the military would enter the territory's southernmost city, Rafah, to destroy Hamas. A judge in Brazil has fined officials and several construction companies nearly $50 million for the collapse of a building site in Sao Paulo. 7 people were killed in the accident in 2007, and dozens of buildings had to be demolished. Workers have been excavating a tunnel for an extension of the city's metro system. Their drilling caused a sinkhole to open on a nearby road, which swallowed pedestrians and vehicles. The US Secretary of Homeland Security has reaffirmed support for Guatemala's new government, which took office last month, having promised to tackle corruption. Alejandro Mayorkas said he was honoured to meet President Bernardo Arevalo at the Security Conference in Munich. Mr. Mayorkas said Guatemala was a key partner in regional economic development and managing migration and combat transnational crime. Donald Trump has begun promoting a new line of shoes bearing his name a day after being fined more than $300 million for fraud. Mr. Trump made the announcement at an event known as SneakerCon in Philadelphia. The former president, who's widely expected to be the Republican nominee in November's election, told the crowd he wanted to look out for young people.
You know, I've wanted to do this for a long time. I have some incredible people that work with me on things, and they came up with this, and this is something I've been talking about for 12 years, 13 years, and I think it's going to be a big success. That's the real deal. That's the real deal.
And that's the latest BBC News.
Hello and welcome to From Our Own Correspondent here on the BBC World Service. I'm Pascal Harter. Coming up in the programme, from guerrilla soldiers to nature guides, we're birdwatching in Colombia with the former FARC rebels who are turning their years of fighting and hiding in the forests to their advantage now that the war is officially over. And we pay a visit to the Australian convenience store, where of course you can buy crisps and chocolate, but you can also learn to fly a plane. First though, as the Israeli military campaign closes in on Gaza's southernmost city, Rafah, the plight of as many as 1.5 million people living there has come sharply into focus. The United Nations head of humanitarian relief has warned that any military action in Rafah would be catastrophic. Satellite images show that virtually every open space in the city has been taken up by tents and other temporary shelters. Israel claims, though, that 4 of Hamas's 6 remaining battalions are in Rafah. And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said that he has drawn up an evacuation plan for Gazans ahead of his planned assault. Details of this remain vague. Throughout this conflict, triggered by the deadly Hamas attacks in October, in which around 1,200 people were killed. It has been difficult for international media to gain access to Gaza to evaluate firsthand the situation on the ground. More than 28,000 people have been killed in Gaza, according to the Hamas-run health authority there. Israel has said that out of 253 people kidnapped by Hamas, more than 100 still remain unaccounted for, and at least 29 are known to be dead. Jeremy Bowen has been in Israel and reflects on why this has been one of the most challenging conflicts to cover.
Some of the lessons I learned as a trainee journalist in Belfast and a few other places almost 40 years ago are curios now, from a bygone age, like the advice to carry a bag of coins. They were to pay for calls from red phone boxes, the ones that tourists pose in these days for Instagram. Older listeners in the UK might remember that when the person at the other end picked up, the pips bleeped frantically as you tried to force a coin into the slot, warning that you were about to be cut off if you didn't get on with it. But the fundamentals of journalism have not changed in the digital age. One, for a reporter, is the importance of getting physically close to the story. Then it's easier to work out what is really happening and to talk to people who are involved or just look and listen. That is as important as ever, even in our world of digital shortcuts, video calls, and the unending torrent of social media pouring into our smartphones. That's why trying to report the war in Gaza without being in Gaza is extremely frustrating. Israel and Egypt, the two countries that control the borders, don't let international journalists into the Gaza Strip. The regime in Cairo has no love for Hamas or for open reporting. The frontier bisects the two sides of the town of Rafah, one side in Gaza and the other in Egypt. When BBC colleagues tried to get to Egyptian Rafah early in the war, the Egyptians wouldn't let them leave Cairo. There are checkpoints on the road that crosses the Suez Canal and moves on through the northern Sinai Desert. If you don't have the right papers, you have to turn around and go home. At least in Israel, you get to places in the south where you can look into Gaza to catch a glimpse of the nightmare world that has been created there by Israel's response to the Hamas attacks of the 7th of October. Even hearing the war helps. I spent most of the time between early October and mid-December, based in Ashkelon, a few miles up the Mediterranean coast from Gaza's northern border. On many days, Israel's massive bombardment was the last thing I heard at night, thumping into my hotel room